as a attendee, and here I am up here on the speaker's stage, and I'm like Jeanette and Denny. This was my most unfavorite place to be. And when I became executive director at the Little Lighthouse, I thought, really, God? Because I never had any intention of being in that position. So I'm just going to share with you how I got involved in nonprofit work, because obviously all of you are very immersed in nonprofits. In 1975, I was in my mid-20s, and my very best friend, who was an ORU graduate, I worked side by side with her at the city of Tulsa. Anyway, we were kind of like kindred spirits, and she really challenged me in my faith. And one day I said, Suzanne, tomorrow you need to be on time to work. Because we worked in the evening with citizen groups, and we would get comp time. And I said, you've got to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, guess what? She did not show up. And that kind of made me angry, because she promised me that she would be there. Long story short, Suzanne never showed up. She was murdered running down Riverside Drive, and part of what we were doing was planning for Vision 2000. Now that it's 2023, Vision 2000 was 25 years away. And part of what Suzanne was doing was planning for the trails over there on Riverside. But to this day, I'll just tell you, they never have found that person that killed my sweet friend. And we had such a kindred spirit. I mean, she could start saying something and I would finish her sentence. So that kind of put me in not only depression and grief and all those emotions that you go through when you have a sudden loss, but then I also had fear, because believe it or not, people would say to me, you know, they never found that guy, did they? And I'd say, no. And they go, well, you know, your name was in the paper, and it says where you worked, and that you were her friend, and you're the one that reported her missing, and aren't you concerned that he's going to be watching for you? So, of course, then I developed this real fear. And so I really knew, I mean, I had been raised in the church, and I knew that Jesus says he's always with us, he never leaves us or forsakes us. So I, turned to my faith. I mean, I went through the stage of, was there really even a God, because he didn't protect Suzanne. But, you look back over the years and you see how God works everything together for good.
Yeah, right.
Everything. And there were so many people who came to know the Lord through Suzanne's death. She did not die in vain, and her life changed my life. But through that, I knew I needed to do something that had eternal value. So I quit my job at the city, and I began praying, and the Lord led me to the Little Lighthouse in 1976. And I volunteered there for probably a year and a half. And there were some weeks as a volunteer that I actually put in 60 hours a week. And I thought, oh my, sooner or later I knew I needed to get a job. So I told the Lighthouse, look, it's been fun, but I've got to get a job. And so they created a position for me, and it was called the Community Relations Coordinator. And I was in charge of everything from recruiting volunteers to all the fundraising. And I made $500 a month. That was my salary. But the next year then, my husband decided he wanted a divorce. So I went through the death of my friend and then to a divorce. And he left me with this nice new house we'd built, and the house payment was $750 a month, and I was making $500. But I lived in that house for 7 years, and God provided every month. And it was because I was going to the Little Lighthouse, and I was watching God provide for this ministry. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that God is the same God I serve, and if he can provide their needs, he can provide my needs. So it was always interesting to figure out every month, not only how I was going to make my house payment, but how I was going to feed myself and pay my utilities and all that. So That's kind of how I got started in nonprofit. I was blessed to work for a ministry that was looking to God. In fact, the mission of the Little Lighthouse is to glorify God by improving the quality of life for children with special needs, their families, and communities. And I loved everything that Jeanette shared. Oh my, I saw so many of our families, be rejected by the church. I mean, literally, we're told, don't come back. And, the goal of the Little Lighthouse in providing and improving the quality of life, of course, no one chooses to have a child with special needs unless you adopt. And I did adopt a little boy with special needs, and that was quite a journey. But, it affects the family spiritually because they think, why God? It impacts them financially because all of a sudden they have all of these financial needs. Socially, you just can't get up and go to an event. Physically, that there's all this equipment and staying up at night, getting up to do medication. So I was very blessed to be a part of the Little Lighthouse Ministry from 1976 until I retired just in 2019. But I think with you all being nonprofit, I just want to encourage you because you are my hero. I know what it takes to run a nonprofit, and I know some of you are probably not Christian-based nonprofits, and you probably are believers, and so you can still pray and believe for whatever your needs are. But it was always amazing to me the different ways we would see God provide. Over the years, as we grew, I think when I got involved with the Lighthouse in '76, our annual budget was $50,000. Well, when I left, it was near $4 million. And it's, wherever you are, you have to believe by faith that God's going to meet that need. And I remember specifically, we had hired a new CPA to do our book. She was just part-time, and I went into her, and we had just kicked off the capital campaign to build the new expansion there at 36th and Yale. And I said, well, Carol, tell me, what is it that you're concerned about? Where are we? How much money do we have in the operating? Where are we with the capital campaign? And she said, well, my biggest concern, because funds are going into the building, we're not going to be able to provide for operating. And she said, and summer's here, it was June, and most of you know that, well, for us, and I know for churches too, the revenue goes down in the summer because people take off and they go on vacation and they forget. So anyway, I remember she said, we need $300,000. And I said, okay, God will provide it. And I'd been around long enough to see God's provision. And the next week, I had an attorney walk in the door, and he said, I just settled an estate. And guess what he gave me? A check for $300,000. So I just want to encourage you, whatever your needs are within your agencies, your ministries, your nonprofits, God is able. And I've heard so many good things shared today. I just want to say, you've got to have the faith, because faith is the things that we hope for. And so when you step out, and you've got to take that step. Every time we had something that we needed to accomplish at the Lighthouse, it always amounted to a step of faith. So I just want to encourage you. I'll be around the rest of the day, and feel free to talk to me if you have any specific questions. But, more than anything, God just gets the glory. He does, because He is faithful. And so wherever you are in your ministry, whether you've just begun, it can be a long journey, and things take time. God's timing is not our timing, but be encouraged.